Welcome to the show.
What show is that?
Welcome to the show.
I'm trying to connect now.
Unable to connect. If you have an internet connection, go fuck yourself, because it doesn't matter. Salvete discipuli et discipuli. It's me again, Miles Crisp, etc. Friday, May 3rd, 2013. Last time I managed to say it was 2003. I don't know how I made that slip. But, becoming in my late 30s, I actually notice I'm confusing decades. So, there's something I'm getting old. How about that? So, the show today is going to be American history. The first part of it is going to be a story of a great American badass named Cassius Marcellus Clay. This is the man for whom Muhammad Ali's father, because Muhammad Ali, the boxer, was Muhammad Ali Jr., so he's named after his dad. Well, his dad was named after this guy. And Cassius Marcellus Clay, the original, was actually a white guy that lived in Kentucky. He was born in 1810 in Madison County, eastern Kentucky. That's kind of sandwiched between the Western Virginia, and Tennessee borders. But anyway, he was sent off to school to go to the east. He went to a northern school where he had an education. I think it was somewhere in New York State or Pennsylvania. I don't remember. And when his father died, he inherited Whitehall Plantation at the age of 21. And his first act as the plantation owner was to do something that completely horrified the rest of the slave-owning southern gentry. And that was to free all 100 of his father's slaves that had worked on this plantation. And in that area, a plantation of 100 slaves was apparently very big. There's some places in the Carolinas where you could have plantations numbering in the thousands, but in this part of the country, a 100-slave plantation was a big one. So, Clay was an abolitionist, and it was very unusual for an abolitionist to exist in the South. Abolitionists were those beginning around the 1820s, mostly around the Hudson Valley in New York originally, were people that were campaigning for the abolishment of slavery as a government institutionalized practice. So, being an abolitionist in the South was extremely rare, and it was even rarer to find one that was so extreme as Cassius Clay is wanting to actually have the full incorporation of blacks in American society. Others in the South would have been relatively sympathetic to the abolitionist cause, would not have wanted them to be fully integrated into society. They thought the solution was to actually to send them to Africa, and that's where you get the attempt with the Liberia colony later on. And let's see here. Few people could have survived in this region having the views that he had, but imagine Muhammad Ali as a white man in that time. 6 foot 3 inches, 250 pounds, and very, very angry. Clay's greatest pleasure in life was fighting. His favorite weapon was the Bowie knife. And a Bowie knife is essentially a really big 1.5 sharp-sided knife, preferred by frontiersmen, mostly attributed to a man named Daniel Bowie, one of the earlier explorers. And the thing that Clay would like to do is he'd walk into a pro-slavery rally, throw the speaker off the podium, and proceed to give an abolitionist message, and that would inevitably lead to a brawl. He loved to fight when he had the physical disadvantage, and he was particularly fond of heckling his congressman. I don't remember his name. The thing he would do is the congressman would come back from Congress, and he would have kind of like a town hall meeting. Well, Clay would always be there waiting, and what he would do is he would stand up and say, "I'm sorry to interrupt you, Of course, that's what he had just done. But justice demands that I say that everything you're saying right now is a damn lie. But since I have no interest in interrupting you, I will sit down and let you resume your lies. That would always lead to a huge fight, and this congressman was getting really sick of every time he tried to have a rally, Clay would be there to pretty much, make everything go crazy and turn it into chaos. So the congressman hired a gunman from Louisiana, a man named Samuel M. Brown, and there was an incident near a political rally at a place called Russell's Cave. That's about 5 or 6 miles out of Lexington, Kentucky. Clay started his usual tactics to start a fight, basically going to a pro-slavery rally and talking about abolition. But what happened was Brown was standing behind him and whacked him in the back of the head with his cane, and Clay fell down for a minute, and as he was getting back up, from about 10 or 15 feet away, Brown shot him point blank, basically, with his pistol. Clay was down, and then there was a bunch of smoke, but the next thing everybody saw, Clay was on top of Brown, and he had cut off one of his ears with his knife, and for still better measure, gouged out one of his eyes, and for still better measure, cracked his skull to the bone. And then he proceeded to pick him up, wrestler style, and threw him over a low wall down a hill, and his body later careened into the waters of that came out of this place called Russell's Cave. And Clay was indicted for mayhem, because back then that was actually a crime, which I think is pretty awesome in and of itself. The indictment for mayhem is where that information comes from. Anyway, the thing is, when Clay was shot, the metal tip at the bottom of his scabbard, because he wore his knife on his breast, was lifted up, and that's where the bullet hit, ricocheted around, and there's an exit hole in the back of his coat. So, Clay's the kind of guy where, he goes into a corner store and gets a lottery ticket. Want to find out what kind of numbers he played? So, this intensely pro-slavery community insisted that he be tried for mayhem. But Clay was defended in court by his cousin, Senator Henry Clay. And toward the end of the trial, one of the quotes I have from Henry Clay was, standing there without aiders or abettors, without popular sympathy, with a pistol of a hired murderer pointed at his heart, would you have had him meaningly and cowardly fly? Basically, the jury acquitted him. And, it was just, their little Southern honor code kind of got the better of them at that point. He immediately resumed his carving activities. Another time, he walked into a pro-slavery rally, rushed up to the speaker's podium, pushed the speaker out of the way, and 5 men jumped up and grabbed him. 4 of them held him down, and a 5th one grabbed his own Bowie knife and stabbed him in the chest. That was when Clay started to have a good time. He pulled the blade out of his own chest, by the blade, and killed 2 of these men. The other 3 ran away. He survived all of these things, the stabbing, the shooting, all that. For a while they were saying he was dead, but when he recovered, he announced that he was going to become a Republican. And at this point, the Republican Party was brand new. In the election of 56 was the last Whig election, I'm pretty sure. It was either that or the one right before it. But anyway, the Republican Party's first election, I believe, was with Lincoln or with 56. So it's a brand new party. And the radical Republicans were the group the abolitionists had bought into. Or the other way around, depending on how you want to look at it. But at the end of the day, the radical Republicans and the abolitionists were towing the same political line. And that was what Clay bought into. This infuriated everybody even more. Of course, that's why he did this. But it's important to remember that Lincoln didn't get a single electoral vote from any southern state, and he wasn't even on the ballot in 1860 here where I am in Virginia. Having announced himself a Republican, another thing he would do is he would, again, go to a pro-slavery rally, rush up to the speaker's platform, push the guy out of the way, and stare into the eyes of his audience. Then he'd reach into his pocket and slap down a copy of the Bible. And he'd say, "For those of you who believe in the laws of God, I have this argument against slavery." You know. Then he would pull out a copy of the Constitution and say, "For those of you who believe in the laws of man, I have this argument against slavery." And then finally, he'd pull out his Bowie knife and say, "For those of you who believe neither in the laws of God nor of man, I have this argument." And then he would proceed to give his speech uninterrupted.
That's really cool, man. I mean, it would have been really insane if they made a movie about this stuff or several, you know. I mean, it has all the elements. It has action. It has all the social involvement.
Oh, I don't want to give away the ending, but it's got a little bit of sex in it too.
And you know the gun surviving, the stabbings stuff. It's better than the today's 50 Cent rumors and whatnot. You know. Yeah,
I mean, I would have a hard time believing this is actually real if it wasn't so historically documented. There's several books, the Lion of Whitehall, and that's mostly where Dr. McClellan got this from. By the way, the lecture I'm pulling this from, I was introduced to this from a man named Dr. James McClellan at Northern Virginia Community College, and he had a little lecture that he did once on this that I saw on public broadcast. I did have a class with him on Native American Studies, but this particular thing I got from television, actually. But, yeah.
Cool.
Anybody have any questions so far?
No, I'd just like to say this guy's a badass.
Mm-hmm. Damn right. Now, next
yes,
time I could do one on Jedediah Smith. That's Jed, like J-E-D like David. That guy survived a grisly attack, and half of his scalp was hanging off his head, and he actually instructed his men how to make a needle and thread and sew his skull all through.
With no anesthetics, I think.
Yeah, no, well, he did have them pour whiskey on it to try to, disinfect
Pour
it.
some whiskey on my brain, boys. Just put it there.
Yeah. And
He's that drink on the noggin.
That guy has a really crappy death because he was running around right as the frontier was kind of getting filled up in the middle of the 1800s, and the last place he was down in southwest near the Mexico border, and he went crazy of thirst and wandered out into the desert saying that he was going home to talk to his wife. His wife, I think, had been dead for like 20 years. Kind of a shitty way to go for such a cool guy. Cassius Clay, on the other hand, the end of this story is spectacular.
Let's go to it.
Now, he wrote a book. As McClellan said, his one contribution to world literature was a book called The Technique of Bowie Knife Fighting. I don't have a quote of the excerpt from it, but I'll paraphrase what it was. Essentially, it's instructions on when you're in a knife fight with somebody, the thing to do is to try to obtain a headlock with them, and then with your left arm, and then with your right hand with the knife, you stab them in the throat. Now, occasionally you come across an opponent, a particularly agile opponent, who thwarts this maneuver, in which case you should not stab him in the chest, as I used to before I became experienced. The thing to do is to double around and cut cut with the, I think he I don't remember how he words it, it's weird, but basically what you do is you stab him in the gut and go down and to the side. You eviscerate them, so that then their guts all just spill out. And he says that usually brings it into the confrontation.
Fascinating details there. I will apply them in my own life. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you're also, I don't think, 6'2", 250 pounds of pure muscle that's done nothing but kill people since he was 21 years old. Although you are Romanian. Got any secrets there?
Well, there are some secrets, but if I tell them, they won't be secrets, right?
And you will have to kill us.
Obviously.
Oh, he'd never get to me.
Are you sure there?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Have underground caverns that go throughout the ocean.
Just shoot him.
Wait, let's
Use a gun. Use a gun.
What kind of gun, though? Let's debate it.
A what?
Use a
Someone said
gun.
something about guns.
What, like shoot a gun from Romania and hit Virginia? That would be impossible.
Just need to calculate for drop.
If only there was a gun that shot lightsabers.
Miles
Now,
is
you-
an expert on guns, though.
No, I'm not. I like old. By the way, for the record, I like antique guns. I'm all about black powder. You know, my dream gun is to have a reproduction of the rifle that was used by the Corps of Discovery in 1804, Lewis and Clark expedition. That was one of the first interchangeable mass-produced guns, because before then you wouldn't be able to take a lock out of one gun and put it in another. They were made specifically for each. Each gun was kind of like tailor-made in a certain way. You couldn't just swap parts and make one gun out of two in the field. This was one of the first guns where you could do that. Yeah. Also, they had it's really confusing, but the mini ball is a bullet, and the musket ball is the round ball thing you think of. When they had the rifled barrel, the conical bullet, which is the mini ball, even though you had a flintlock and you didn't have a telescopic sight, you basically had a rifle in 1804 that would be as accurate, theoretically, as a normal 30-06 hunting rifle today, assuming you didn't have a scope. I don't know if anybody has any idea what I'm talking about.
Scopes are good.
I have a slight idea.
Yeah.
Scopes are good because you can see your enemy from far away.
Mm-hmm. I don't like them because to me that just takes most of the talent out of it.
Yeah, skill.
I don't care for it.
But efficiency, man, efficiency.
I still think you should only be allowed to hunt with knives.
Well, I'll tell you, you go hunting with a flintlock and it's raining, or if it's humid, the powder, you know how a flintlock works? You actually have the piece of flint strikes a metal plate, and there's a little pan of powder, and that spark hits the powder that goes inside the barrel that sets off the shit in the barrel that shoots the bullet out.
Ah.
Well,
Yes.
if it's damp, that's not going to go off. So you could have a bear charging at you, or whatever, and you click, oh shit, nothing happened,
Yeah.
That's why they were so big on having bayonets.
Though a bayonet versus a bear isn't a very good fight either.
No, it's not. But it would be better than your hands, I suppose.
This is why I would prefer to hunt with a pack of wolves. They could
Oh.
distract the bear while I climb a tree then and jump down with my Bowie knife and kill the bear, and then we could eat it.
I don't think the wolves would be willing to share.
I would make myself a part of their pack and growl at them.
I'm not sure the wolves would be willing to fight the bear anyway unless they were really hungry.
Wolves do sometimes kill and eat bears.
Yeah, I think a lot of
But
times
mainly
the
when
bear,
they're starving.
Well, the bear
Yes.
might be wounded too. I mean, they're opportunistic.
They will outsmart the bear, and they will go for his flanks and distract him when they are biting out his asshole.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, and they get like 10 or 12 of them. One wolf or even maybe 2 or 3 probably wouldn't be able to take a grizzly bear, I would imagine.
Well, maybe not, but I have a Bowie knife, and I am up a tree, and I will fall on top of the bear.
Yeah.
That will wound him.
Well, grizzly bears don't climb trees, I don't think, but black bears and brown bears do, so climbing a tree with those is apparently the wrong thing to do. But I don't think black bears attack terribly much. One of the techniques the natives around here used to have for hunting black bears is they just have the women and children make a bunch of noise, and that would scare the black bears, and they'd run up a tree, and then once they got up into the tree, they'd just stand under it with a bow and arrow and shoot it and let it fall down. It's like, yep, there we go.
Yes, this is an efficient way to cool a black bear, I suppose. We don't have bears over here, so I have no experience with them whatsoever.
No, but you do have, what is that weird creature you have? It's kind of like a raccoon.
Badger?
Yeah, badger. Yeah, I've never seen a badger before.
There are badgers in America, but they're not as big. Yeah, well, I don't actually see an awful lot of them around where I live. Although there are some of them, but I've never really seen them. I've heard people whose dogs tried to attack a badger and ended up worse for it. They're formidable little things. They say when they bite you, they don't let go until they hear a snap.
Wow.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't mess with them.
Yeah, they somehow remind me of mongooses a little bit, but I know that's not right.
No, they're actually closer related to weasels. Badgers, I think they're in the same.
Oh, okay. Alright. Do you have groundhogs?
No, we don't have groundhogs.
Okay.
I know what a groundhog is, though. It's like a large
That's
rodent.
right, yeah, it's probably too damn wet, they just drown. Oh.
Well, our
yeah.
sheep survive.
Groundhogs can swim really well, actually.
So can beavers. We used to have beavers, apparently. They were killing
Oh, really?
us.
Oh, okay.
There used to be wolves here, too.
Is it
We have
true
more
there is it true what my brother-in-law says, that there are literally no snakes in Ireland?
Well, no, that's not true. I have pet snakes. There's no wild indigenous snake species.
Damn, he was right.
We only have one indigenous reptile. It's a brown lizard.
Frog. Oh, yeah,
No,
the frog's an
don't.
amphibian. Yeah. Okay. Well, how about that?
And all the leprechauns are dead.
Mm.
They died out during the famine when we ate them.
Okay. Well, continuing on with Cassius Clay. There was this guy in Illinois, and Illinois was a free state. You had free states and slave states at the time. Illinois was a free state. But this man named Elijah Lovejoy had a printing press that was destroyed 3 times because he was printing pro-abolitionist, anti-slavery magazine, newspaper kind of thing. Eventually he was killed. And Clay, when he found out about that making a pro-abolitionist, anti-slavery printing press newspaper might be a good way to pick another fight. So, this is how he designed his printing press. He bought a 2-story building made of brick in a town with a lower door at the street and a staircase that went up to the 2nd floor where he had his printing press, and another big iron and another door there. He had huge iron doors brought in, one for the downstairs street level and one upstairs that actually went up to the printing press. And in front of that 2nd door upstairs, he placed 2 cannon that he filled with horseshoes and nails and aimed them chest high as you were walking up the stairs. And then, inside his printing press area, he had stacks of shotguns. So, if you got through his iron doors, and you got through his cannons, and you got through his shotguns, the last thing he had were 4 big barrels of black powder at the corners of that room upstairs, with a fuse that led up to the roof to an escape hatch where if you got through all of those things and you got through his shotguns and all that, he'd simply climb out the roof, light the fuse, and blow the whole printing press up. Cassius Clay was able to experience freedom of the press through this mechanism. How awesome is that? Now, when the Civil War broke out, basically he could do legally what he had been doing illegally for decades, carving up slave owners. So he marched up to Lincoln in Washington, D.C., with a motley conclave of about 200 men who were dressed in civilian clothes and marching rigorously out of step. He stopped Lincoln as he drove out of the grounds of the White House and demanded that he be made a general in the Union Army. And incidentally, I can still say he drove out of the White House, even if it's a horse-drawn thing, if anybody wanted to nitpick. Now, Lincoln was not an uncompassionate man. And releasing Cassius Clay with an army and turning him loose on the South would probably have been the 19th century equivalent to first strike with a nuclear weapon. But neither was Cassius Clay the sort of man who liked to hear the word no. And Lincoln realized that. So Lincoln commissioned him as a major general in the Union Army, and then he looked for the farthest spot on Earth to send him, and he made him the United States envoy to Russia. Just get him out of here. Excuse me. Surprisingly, he was the perfect guy for the job. The Russians were still a rough-and-tumble society at the time, and Clay soon realized that the Russian noblemen learned from an early age how to fight with swords. And they liked that kind of stuff. So they were much more fun to fight with than the American plantation owners who really didn't have that kind of experience. And the other thing he found out was that the Russian noblemen owned serfs. And the serfs were pretty much the same thing as plantation-style slavery. The technical difference is that a serf... Really, the only difference between a serf and a slave is that a serf isn't really owned by anyone. It's kind of like, slaves are human property. Serfs are like, alright, like if slaves are cattle that you own as livestock, serfs are like deer that you hunt when you feel like it. Alright? Serfs don't necessarily have to be fed. There's no buying and selling, really. They're just kind of there. Basically, you just go and gather up a bunch of poor people and make them work for you. Because what else are they going to do? So that's the basic difference between having a serf system and a slave system. Anyway, Cassius Clay hated these guys. And he kept winning all the duels they would have because they would end up challenging him to the duel, and as the person being challenged, he always had the right to choose his weapon, and he invariably chose the Bowie knife. And the Russian rapier-bearing swordsmen were conspiring at every turn to try to trick him into making the challenge so that they would have the right to choose the weapon. They thought then they'd be able to kill him. So one day he was found having dinner at a cafe, and this Russian nobleman came up to him, slapped him in the face with his glove, and stood back and waited to receive the minister's charge to a duel. But Cassius Clay wasn't going to do that kind of crap. He just stood up, punched the guy in the face as hard as he could. He fell down carrying with him a storm of falling china, looked around belligerently for further opposition, and seeing none, parted the tails of his frock coat and sat down to resume his interrupted meal. He was garnering a reputation for himself in St. Petersburg with his quick pugnacity, just being willing to fight at the drop of a hat, because that's what had kept him alive for so long when he was in Kentucky. And the Russians thought this was just great. They loved this guy, and apparently he probably had an affair with the Tsar's daughter, maybe even the Tsar's wife, and he also killed one Archduke, one of the heirs to the throne in a duel. And when he came back from Russia, he brought with him a baby girl that he had with a Russian ballerina. So, yeah. Now, incidentally, there were people that were saying that Clay should run for vice president with Lincoln in the election of 1864. Lincoln was looking for somebody from a border state. Kentucky was a border state, and after Lincoln would have been assassinated, Cassius Clay would have become president. Imagine that. Reconstruction would have been, well, Clay would have. Well, you know what? I don't know if you could assassinate that man. They'd definitely be trying. I don't know if that man would have ever been assassinated. Now that's something you should make a movie on. What if Cassius Clay became president? But anyway, after all this, after the war, you'd think that he would have chilled out. You know, he was getting into his, I think, 50s at that, his 50s at that point. And, you know, he would stop fighting. But he didn't. At the age of 84, Cassius Clay got married. The bride was 15 years old. The townspeople went ape. They rounded up a posse. They were going to go over to Whitehall, grab the girl, rescue her, arrest Clay, blah, blah, blah. This is my favorite part of the story. Here's a letter from the sheriff of that town explaining why that mission failed. Richmond, Kentucky, November 14th, 1894. Judge John C. Chenault. Dear Judge, I'm reporting about the posse like you said I had to. Judge, we went out to Whitehall, but it didn't do no good. It was a mistake to go out there with only 7 men. Judge, the old general was awful mad. He got to cussing and a shooting, and we had to shoot back. The old general sure did object to being arrested. Don't let no one tell you that he didn't. And we had to shoot. I thought we hit him 2 or 3 times, but don't guess we did. He sure didn't act like it. And we came out right good considering. I'm having some misery from 2 splinters of wood in my side. Dick Hollier was hurt a little when his shirt tail and breeches were shot off from a piece of horseshoe and nails that came out of the general's old cannon. Have you seen Jack? He wrenched his neck and as his horse throwed him as we was trying to get away. Judge, I think you're going to have to go up to Frankfort and see Governor Brown. If the governor can send Captain Longmire out here with 2 light fielders, he could divide his men and send some with a cannon to the front of the house, but not too close, and others around through the cornfield and up around the cabins to the spring house to the back porch. I think this might do it. Respectfully, Joshua P. Simmons, High Sheriff. That didn't work either. At the age of 93, Cassius Clay had his last fight with a Bowie knife. 3 men broke into his house at night, and he sent a servant for help. The next morning, 1 man was seen running down the road, turning himself in. They found a second one in the yard who had bled to death from a naval wound, and a third was in his parlor with his jugular cut. But Clay sustained wounds in this encounter and died a short time later, ending a glorious diplomatic career. But killing 2 out of 3 armed assailants at the age of 93 isn't really bad. And that's the end of him. That's the end of Cassius Clay the First.
What a life he led. I just think it's a travesty that they haven't made a movie about this man. It would most certainly do well. Quentin Tarantino needs to do something about this. Perhaps a Django sequel where Cassius Clay is the character.
Hey man, that would be cool. And if you do it, you gotta have him run on the ticket in '64 with Lincoln, because that would really be funny.
It would, but you know, I it's crazy. I've never heard of this man before now. You know, and maybe it's because he was a bit of a wild card and he did his own thing. But would you say he's like it'd be wrong to phrase it as a minor character from American history, but he's definitely not as well.
He's definitely a minor character in American history. I mean, it's not like he was even. We have presidents that are minor characters in our history, and he wasn't even of that level. You know, I mean,
I suppose you could kind of sum him up as like, you know, but he was like a barroom brawler. You know, politics. He doesn't really seem like the kind of guy for politics, but it was a different age back then.
Yeah, well, have you heard of David Crockett?
I have heard of Davy Crockett, yes.
He was
the guy who used to wear the raccoon hat, is it?
Yeah, well, the thing is, everybody back then wore those, but he became mythologized in the 1950s by Disney. And he's my least favorite of all of these, quote, American heroes, because he's been Disneyfied, and I don't care if I'm offending anybody. I fucking hate Disney. But, anyways.
Fucking Masons.
No, the Masons are cool. I just hate Disney.
Walt Disney was a racist, and he ate children.
Yeah. Well, Walt Disney was a huge anti-Semite along with Ford.
Ford, who made the car?
Yep.
Ah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think he came from
Huge,
Irish, though.
huge anti-Semites. Oh, yeah. You ever heard of the German Bund that was going around in the 1920s and 30s in the United States? It was essentially the American... This is kind of an oversimplification of it, but it was sort of like the American Nazis.
I had never heard of them, no. The American
Yeah.
Nazis.
Yeah, Bund, B-U-N-D. It's something like the German-American Bund or Deutsche Amerikaner Bund or something like that. I should have even mentioned it because I don't really know a lot about it. But it was, like I said, it was kind of like you had Communist Party stuff in the United States in the 20s with the Bolsheviks, sympathetic to Lenin and stuff like that. Oh, I know. The blind, deaf, and dumb lady. What's her name? Drawing a blank. Damn it. You used to have all those... Helen Keller. Yeah, how do you scare Helen Keller? Anyway, Helen Keller was a raging communist. A lot of people don't know that about her.
And how is this not known? Because it is not convenient, perhaps.
Well, most people remember the movie. The movie came out, I think, in the 40s or the 50s. That, at least in the United States, it was a pretty famous movie about Helen Keller, she was blind, deaf, and dumb, and this teacher managed to teach her sign language by feel, and then she learned how to read, and later did Braille, so she was able to communicate. But yeah, she was a little girl around the 1890s, I think, 1880s.
Yeah, I'm mildly familiar with Helen Keller. She's not celebrated over here so much as Lizzie Borden for some reason.
Really? Oh yeah.
Well,
I guess Lizzie Borden would make a little bit more sense. We have a colonial version of her that's Hannah Dustin. Hannah Dustin was kidnapped by Iroquois or something like that, one of the Massachusetts colonies in the late 1600s. And or actually, I think it was the mid 1600s. Anyhow, she ended up killing 4 women, 2 children, and 3 men, or something like that, and scalped them, and came back with scalps.
She scalped children?
Yep.
Why?
Now, well, the reason she scalped children is when she was kidnapped, she had her baby in her arms, and the Indian that kidnapped her took the baby by its legs and bashed its head against the tree, and then grabbed her, tied her up, and carried her off. And at night, when they were sleeping, that night making camp on the way back to wherever those guys were from, she woke up, talked to her friend, and the 2 of them killed everybody. And it was, like I said, it was like 3 men, their wives, and I think there were like 2 kids there.
Well, you bash a child's head against a tree. That's pretty fucked up.
Yeah, that'll piss you off a little bit.
Yeah, that'll do it, all right.
Yep. Yeah, but today she's a very controversial figure. There's a statue of her in whatever town, and I think it's Massachusetts. I'm really ignorant of New England, so if anybody's from there, I'm going to be screwing this up. But somewhere between New York and Boston, there's a town where there's a statue of her, and she's holding this axe in her right hand and a scalp in her other. It's really cool. But
basically, she won't take no crap off you, and that's the attitude we're gonna. Yeah. You say that, you know?
Oh, I remember now. I got this last semester with an American history class I was taking, and I went and looked this up from the Historical Society at that town. They actually sell a souvenir Hannah Dustin bobblehead, and it's got a little bloody axe on it and everything, with what a bobblehead character is.
Oh, how charming.
Yeah.
Because I'd so want to buy one of those if I went there. Like, wow, this is a really civilized country. Look, they make a cute little celebration of this crazy woman who lived a life of blood and violence.
Well, so did Cassius Clay, but he just did it for slightly more noble reasons. But even that, it's debatable. I mean, they killed a child,
don't get me wrong. It's like we say it's epic that Cassius Clay did this and Cassius Clay did that, but really, how many of us would want to have stayed in the same room with the man had we shared the time with him? I don't think I would have been too comfortable around him. I mean, I'm not a racist or anything like that, but, well, he does sound like a bit of a Bowie knife-wielding sociopath.
Yeah, he seems like somebody who he just kind of jumped onto a cause, and how many guys were like him that were pro-slavery and killing abolitionists?
Yeah, well, to me it kind of sounds like it was convenient. I mean, he might have believed in that as well, but it was just he identified someone he could beat on, more or less, and went along.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it sounds like to me, just like hearing the summary of it. I could be wrong. I'm not going to claim to be an authority on the subject, but that's what I currently believe.
Yeah. Well, I still haven't gotten a copy of The Lion of Whitehall, so I haven't read up any more of this. There's other tales and stories. I just don't know them yet. But, yeah, I mean, the more people I could turn on to the life of Cassius Marcellus Clay, the better. So.
Well, you succeeded here, my friend.
Good. Now, kind of being a little chronological here, I wanted to mention, has anybody heard of Rush Limbaugh by any chance? Well, if you haven't, that's fine. He's just a conservative pundit in the United States. But I usually listen to him on the radio because it wakes me up, gets me to yell at things. But I usually make it a rule not to talk about politics on this show. But I did want to bring up and explain the history behind the American phenomenon of having what people in the political sphere are calling anchor babies. And essentially that's when, under United States law, if you have a child in the United States, barring being a diplomat, a foreign blah 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 or something like that, you can pretty much stow away into the country, have a kid, and the kid is automatically a United States citizen, even if the parents are not. And there's a lot of people coming in from Mexico and other Latin American countries, and this is happening. Whether they want it to be happening or not, it's happening. You have people that have been living in this country illegally for decades. They're going to have kids. It's just natural. Anyway, the reason this law exists is one of the amendments to our Constitution. The 14th Amendment, which came in I think, 1866 or 68, was basically designed to make the former slaves U.S. citizens. And the argument at the time was they can't be citizens because they used to be people's property. They cease being their property, yes, because you abolished slavery, but you still haven't made them citizens. So they had to have another amendment to make them citizens. And the argument the amendment uses is, well, they were born in the United States, weren't they? That's where this comes from. So since the slaves were born in the United States, they would become citizens. And then, of course, you have the 15th Amendment that says, yes, they are citizens, and by the way, guys, that means they can fucking vote and hold office. They had to say the same thing 3 times, basically, 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. But those were all right after the Civil War in the late 60s, early 70s of the 1800s. So that's pretty much how that came into being. But the other thing about the 14th Amendment is it essentially nullified the Dred Scott decision from the Supreme Court, and I wanted to tell that story. The Supreme Court, when they have a decision, it creates precedent, of course, for later interpretations of the law. In 1857, there was a guy that worked in the Army, an Army doctor named John Emerson, and he purchased a slave named Dred Scott, and actually he adopted the name Scott from somebody else, one of the abolitionists that hired a lawyer to help defend him on this, but that's another story. Anyway, what happened was he bought this man in Missouri, which was a slave state. He then went over to Illinois, either for personal reasons or because he was transferred because he worked at the Army. I don't remember, but either way, he brought his slave into Illinois, which was a free state. And Dred Scott was arguing that he was then emancipated because slavery was illegal in Illinois. Therefore, he can't be this man's property anymore because he went into a free state. The Supreme Court basically, the Dred Scott decision basically said, no, that's not how it works. For example, if you have a dry county in a particular state in the United States, after we did our stupid experiment of prohibiting the sale, manufacture, and consumption of alcohol, once we repealed, I think that was the 19th Amendment, we made it so that the states could decide whether or not they wanted to ban alcohol. So you could have a county in a state that's what we call a dry county. You can't sell booze there. You can still have alcohol. If you're in your car and you've got an unopened bottle of whatever and you drive through that county, you're not going to be arrested or anything. That's fine. You just can't sell it there. Same deal with Dred Scott. Yeah, slavery is, you're not allowed to practice it here, but if you're passing through, or in this case visiting, that's fine. The law from where the deed was done essentially holds precedent. And the 14th Amendment was what nullified that. That's the other major thing it does. So, but the other interesting thing about this is the American Aborigines, the Native Americans, they didn't actually become United States citizens until 1924. Figure that one out. They had definitely been born here, but I think, crazy as it is, I think the argument was that they were technically not born on American soil because they were on either reservations or they were... it's kind of hard to describe this because essentially you're minding your own business on land you've been on for a while, and then these other people come in and draw a political boundary around you and then make you leave. So somehow, even though you never went anywhere, you became a foreign invader. That's how the law interprets Native Americans. So there's some Native Peoples Act of 1924 or something like that. I don't remember what it's called, but that's what finally made them U.S. citizens. And another thing I keep regurgitating is that Indian Territory became the state of Oklahoma, and a few years before that, they were trying to become the state of Sequoia, but they refused to allow them. You had the Sooners, fucking Okies, that went in there and petitioned to have what had been Indian Territory created as a state, because essentially the frontier had filled up by that point. We're talking the late 1900s. I think Oklahoma became a state in 1909, and later on it was 1912 when Arizona and New Mexico came in. Other than Alaska and Hawaii, Arizona and New Mexico are our newest states. They've not even been around for, well, now they've been around for 100 years, but just barely. So, go figure that the Navajo Indian Reservation, and I think it borders a few states around the Four Corners region, but I think it's mostly in New Mexico. The land area of that reservation is larger than the land area of the state of West Virginia, which is a sizable state, albeit there's nothing there but rocks and trees and largely abject poverty and
dirt.
Yeah, and mountaintop removal and yeah. Hey, there's something I could rant about. You guys ever heard about the mountains they're blowing up in West Virginia to get the coal?
Nope.
Yeah, they've stopped mining now. Now what they do is they just come around and they actually just dynamite the whole top of this mountain and shove it down into a valley, and then they scoop out the gold, the core. Damn it! They scoop out the coal from the core of the mountain, and after that's done, it looks like the moon. It's just exposed bedrock. There's nothing. You're not going to have a forest there for thousands of years. There's not even topsoil yet. yeah, you get some moss and crap that'll start growing, but I mean, you're not gonna. I mean, the Southern Appalachia is, believe it or not, in the top 5 of the most ecologically diverse regions in the world.
Interesting stuffs, my friend.
Yeah.
Before you were talking about the native Indians and stuff, so, you know, I was having this conversation on a YouTube video in the comment section, where all the trolls are. And it was very funny, you know, there was this American who was like, "We're the home of the brave and the land of the free," or something.
Yeah,
You
it's
know?
basically classic propaganda, but yeah.
And I was like, "What? You just killed many Native Americans with guns, and they had bow and arrow. And so what's brave about that, man?"
Well, it's even beyond that. Like, that's the oversimplified version that you hear from people, but it's actually worse. Because there's a thing where Thomas Jefferson was giving a speech to the Cherokee, and he was saying that in the same day, in the morning he gave a speech to the Cherokee, and in the evening he gave a speech to the people of Georgia. And in the morning he said that the Cherokee would keep their land as long as the sky is blue. And then that evening he was talking to the Georgian people that wanted to settle that part of what's now the northwestern hunk of Georgia, essentially. And, well, basically the whole northern part of Georgia, really. Anyway, he said that we're going to get the Indians out of there as quickly as can be peaceably obtained or achieved. So, you know, they were giving with the right hand and taking with the left hand at the same time. You know, it wasn't just that we were coming in there and killing them. We were also bamboozling them and lying to them and manipulating them, and finally, after a long time of this happening towards the end of the 1800s, you had native groups that otherwise would have had nothing to do with each other, and they're just like, you know what, we have a mutual enemy, fuck it, let's kill as many of these guys as we can. And the Indian Wars were a war of extermination. There is no other way around that. They were. The only reason that there's even any Indians around to this very day is, I think, probably because of the technology they had at the time. If they had the technology we had today and they were doing this, there wouldn't be a soul surviving.
Huh. So gunpowder was not enough to destroy them.
Well, you didn't even... You know, when the buffalo were killed off was after the invention of the repeating rifle. And to clarify, a repeating rifle is, you know how with a muzzle loader you have to use a ramrod and ram it all down the barrel every time you want to shoot? Well, a repeater is a gun that doesn't have to do that. You could have a cap and ball 6-shooter, and that would be considered a repeater.
So it's like a semi-automatic?
Yes, but, alright, a cap and ball revolver. You know what a revolver looks like. Everybody knows what a revolver handgun looks like. I hope. Now, imagine if you had to put a little bit of gunpowder into every single one of those barrels, and then put a ball in every single one of those barrels. And then at the other end of it, you'd have to put a little cap at the back. If you had a 6-shooter, six caps. Although no person that has half a brain would ever load all 6 of those things, because you don't have a safety. You don't want... If you loaded all 6 of them, and you just whacked the back of that hammer, the gun would discharge. So you would usually only fill 5 of them, and you'd leave the hammer on the empty one. And then once you pull the hammer back, if you're talking about a single action, you know, blah, blah, blah. But, anyway.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah. Now, then the other thing is you have cartridges, like a lever-action Winchester or something like that around about the 1870s, late 1870s. Actually, I think this might have been the early 70s. Yeah, 72, 73, I think. But anyway, that's what that's basically when they were able to kill off all of these buffalo, because there were billions of them. You know?
Right. Hey, Miles, you want a break?
Yeah, let's have a little break. What kind of music options do we have?
Let me see here. I need to connect to the... I forgot to connect to the server. God damn it. I'm a very professional person. We have some Django Reinhardt for today, my friend.
Alright. That's it?
That is all that I managed to get for now.
Alright, well,
because I got it with 10 minutes before the show, just to to have something to play. Just gonna.
Things might go a little differently if I started paying you.
Let's see now. I will just play the song and we will be back after the songs.
What, 5 minutes?
More like 10 or 12.
Yeah, let's do that sometime right after top of the hour. Okay, here's the second half of the show. Well, first part going on about mid-1800, mid-19th century history, Cassius Clay and the 14th Amendment. This time, I want to talk about Native Americans again. And I realized that a lecture... Well, alright, let me back up. I realized, A, I'm not really good at lecturing. B, this isn't really the best forum for having a lecture. And C, who would really have the attention span to sit down and listen to my ass having rambled on about this stuff for, this is now the sixth show. All of that considered, I am going to try to be as broad and as easy to remember as possible with what I'm going to go on about with the natives. So you have the lower 48 United States. That's, the part of America between Mexico and Canada. That's what we're discussing here mostly. I'm going to mention the Valley of Mexico and Central America, which is essentially Mexico City down to Guatemala, down to Panama, that area. So Europeans, the Spanish, came into the New World around about 1500. So for purposes of the spread of diseases, when they were introduced into the New World, the round date is 1500 AD. Remember that the diseases wiped out approximately 90% of all native groups, probably within about the first 150 to 250 years. That is between, up to about 1700 to 1750. There, with very few exceptions, all the groups had contact with the diseases, not because the Europeans had explored and made contact with them directly, but because their trade networks had managed to spread the disease. And again, they managed to spread this disease at an average rate of 400 miles per year. So it didn't take very long for this to spread around both the North and South American continents. So when I talk about the way we're reconstructing what the natives were like before we had contact, we're basing it on information we got after contact. You with me? The Europeans came over, the Europeans killed all these people through the diseases inadvertently and then later on purpose. And then right at the end of the 1800s, right when the last vestiges of resistance were in the southwest and the northern plains, Geronimo and etc. Et al. But right at the end of that, you started having anthropologists with the Bureau of Ethnology come around and basically just sort of try to figure out what they can before they're obviously going to all be wiped out and exterminated. Some people think that's noble. I think it's kind of like giving somebody medical treatment after you broke into his house, raped his wife, and stabbed him 5 times, but he still didn't die, and you felt guilty, so you called 911. But
that's
anyway,
of a realistic perspective on things.
Yeah. So I want to emphasize that anything that anybody says, including me, about what happened, what the native groups were like before 1500 is all a guess. 90% of them were killed. We're basing all of the stuff on the survivors of 10%. Now that's in terms of history. Archaeologically, of course, we have evidence up the wazoo versus the evidence we have historically. Now, archaeology doesn't give you all the answers. It just in the one where I was talking about the Hohokam, we have evidence that they didn't seem to have a ruling class. Well, how do we know that? Well, because all the houses are the same size. Nobody's got a big house. Okay. Well, maybe they just didn't have a lot of shit to build houses, so it was just a matter of practicality. You still could have had a chief guy that everybody had to, bow down and kiss his feet every time he walked by him. That still could have happened. We don't know because we don't have evidence to say one way or the other. But we do know when we have societies that don't have a ruling class and then they get one, they start having houses bigger than other houses. You start having rich and poor, lords and peasants.
Yeah. Also, in tribes that still exist today, in places like in some places in Africa and in the Amazon, they all have a certain hierarchy style of, making things work in their little tribe.
Yeah. But you still don't have the emphasis is on material wealth. Like you could have there's tribes in New Guinea where they have what they call a big man, and a big man is the guy who has the most pigs because that's their main meat source. So the more pigs you have, the richer you are as a farmer. Whoever has the most pigs is called the big man, and he is sort of like the first to speak when the tribe gets together and debates something, and he can kind of suggest courses of action and things like that. But if he comes up with an idea and everybody else thinks it's stupid, they're going to say, "Hey, screw you. We're doing it this way."
Yeah.
It wasn't binding.
We need something like that.
Well, the complexity of society keeps increasing, and that's why we have these problems. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but I mean it's true. If you don't have anything to worry about other than growing your beans and getting some meat and making the roof not leak, life's not that. It's not as complicated. You still have people getting pissed at each other and greed and vengeance and all that, but there's fewer avenues for it, Like now you get people that are, killing other people because they pissed them off when they were driving home from work. That never would have happened 100 years ago. Now, you might have people that want to kill somebody after work, but it's not going to be because he cut them off in his buggy.
Yeah, and then they didn't have psychologists and psychiatrists and stuff like that.
It would be because you had sex with his cousin.
Now it's all based on the psychological morality, and back then they didn't have any major guidelines and books of how the human brain works, and yet they were very peaceful.
Yeah, guess what book they were using? I hate to sound like a smartass, but it was the Bible. Anyway, yes, the Earth is dead religion. But anyway, so all of what I was saying considered, before 1500, it is estimated that there were 62 language families in North and South America. There were 62 language families in what is now the United States. There are more of them in North and South America. I do not have a firm number for that, but it is between 200 and 500, I have heard. But anyways, a language family is different from a language. Romanian, Latin, English, German, we're all Indo-European language speakers. If you know somebody that speaks Basque, or Hungarian, or Finnish, Those are three examples of European languages that are non-Indo-European in their language families. Basque and Hungarian are their own language families, and there's no other related language in the world that has been argued. Well, actually, there's debates with Hungarian, but they're kind of like their own language families and languages in the same thing. Mm-hmm. Finnish, the Finnish is related to the Finnish Uralic language family. There's other languages in Russia that are related to Finnish. Turkish, in Mongolia, they're Turkish speakers. There's also Turkish speakers in Turkey. Those are two different languages in a language family. So what I'm getting at is, in what now is the lower 48 United States, there were 62 language families, and there's only 4 in Europe. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about cultural splintering, cultural diversity. You have peoples that, although they live in the same area, they build houses the same way, they build their bows and arrows the same way, they hunt the same animals, they worship completely different gods. They have completely different languages. They have completely different social customs and totally different ways of viewing the world, and at no point did they ever consider them the same people as their neighbors. White guys come over from England, they just see Indians. A classic example of this is the Comanche and the Cheyenne. Now, the Cheyenne, I think I've mentioned in an earlier show. They only had sex I said they had sex once a lifetime. That's not correct. They would have sex repeatedly with a postmenopausal spouse. And the other thing is, and again, the reason for this is the Cheyenne were a nomadic people. They lived in the Great Plains of the United States. The stereotypical Indian image comes from this. Mm-hmm. The reason this is the stereotypical image of the native is because it depicts them as being nomadic.
And idiots with no culture.
Well, no, it still depicts them as having a culture, but it's a very brutish and barbaric culture.
Yeah.
Now, they were in, as far as numbers are concerned, both before 1500 and after, the majority of natives in what's now the United States lived east of the Mississippi, and they were settled agriculturalists. Guess what? You get more population when you're a settled agriculturalist. That's why everybody does it when they're introduced to it. I can't think of a single group that was given a plant to plant and grow that said, oh, fuck that, with the possible exception of the French and the English. They refused to eat potatoes for a while there. The Germans were, I think, the first to adopt potatoes, and the Irish, I believe, were the second to adopt potatoes. And I heard the reason the Germans did it actually was because Napoleon's army had a habit of marching over fields of wheat and destroying the harvest. So if you have, if you know the army's going to do that, if you grow potatoes and they march the horses over it, most of the potatoes are still okay.
Yeah, smart decision there.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember where I heard that from. I do believe it though, because you know, them pesky Germans. But anyways, now when the Europeans came, there were 329 languages, native languages spoken. How many families that is? It's one of they would have been part of these 62 language families.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy, though. It's like giant. Exactly. And the really crazy thing is, let me just read out these numbers here. And there are 329 languages in what's now the United States. There are 209 still spoken today. So you got 329 in America, 350 in Mexico and Central America, and in South America combined there are 1,450. This creates a total of approximately 12,000 languages from, like I said, it's somewhere around 80 to 100-something or 200-something language families in both North and South America combined, which represented 1/3 of the world's linguistic diversity, with less than 10% of the world's population. That's shocking to hear. I didn't know anything about that.
So there's barely any people here. There's vast separation and distance between them. And even when they do happen to have some neighbors, even though they're probably 100-something miles away from you, even that, when you go talk to them, they're speaking a language that's as different from yours as Chinese is to English, or any other European language.
Yeah, it's even hard to think. How would it have
How
been
do you get so
possible?
much diversity? Exactly. And this is one of the reasons that, one of the arguments that goes against the old Clovis doctrine. The Clovis point, Clovis. There's a Clovis date that's round about 1100 BC, and that number can fluctuate. I'm not being precise right now, but round about 11,000 BC, right at the end of the last ice age. 11,000 BC. That's when you have the first documented, we can prove it unequivocally, natives that crossed from Siberia through that little. They talk about the land bridge from Siberia to Alaska. That's actually not the interesting part. The interesting part is when the ice, because Alaska was ice-free, Canada and the northern part of the United States was covered in a 2-mile thick layer of ice. That layer of ice had a corridor, basically like if you drew a line from Fairbanks to Detroit-ish, that's kind of what it was like, just like a slash through Canada there. An ice-free corridor came up by about 13,000 BC, give or take. That's how the Clovis people came in there. Well, the problem is, how do you explain this much diversity if you're going to tell me all these people came from the same initial group?
The same language family and same.
You would assume, unless Siberia 15,000 years ago was one really hell of a rich, diverse, flourishing place, which I don't believe for a minute. It's Siberia. I mean,
it's crazy.
At no time in human history was Siberia a cool, nice. Well, it was cool, but at no point was it a lovely place. Anyway. Now, there's a site that I usually mention. It's called Monteverde in Chile.
Which means the Green Mountain or something.
Yes, it does, in Spanish. And
language.
yeah, I know, because it's pretty, Vermont, I mean, you know what Vermont means. Right?
Something with mountain, but I don't know what.
Same thing. It's in French.
Because it's like
Vermont. Yeah.
They cut the de part, verde, so it's just Vermont.
Yeah, it still means Green Mountain. But anyway, that site in Chile is pre-Clovis. It's about 15,000 years old. That demonstrates that they came by a coastal route, because think about the ecosystems you are traveling through. I'll give you a European context. Imagine if you're a people and you're all from Ireland, and you want to go to Johannesburg. What would be the easier way to do it? Go in some sort of lickety-reeky-dinky little boat and kind of skirt down the coast until you get to Spain, and then go over to Morocco and kind of skirt down the coast of Africa, and you'll eventually get there. Or would you walk via, Istanbul and go through Israel and through the Sinai and then through the Sahara Desert, through the mountains of Ethiopia into the Upper Nile, through the Great Lakes region, through the Congo, through the Kalahari Desert, and then down into South Africa to Johannesburg? You'd be dead.
Yeah, that would suck.
You would never make that attempt. No rational animal would ever even contemplate such a thing.
Yeah.
Of course they peopled through the coast. Of course they went down the coast. I mean, it's just obvious.
Yeah,
but
makes sense.
No, we can't have that in history books, because that's brown people doing something white people didn't figure out how to do until 500 years ago. That's the reason, damn it. Good old-fashioned racism. That's all it fucking is, man.
It all comes down to the racism.
Yeah.
And to the psychological problems of people.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than just, seeing it as an observer rather than a participant.
Mm. Well, anyway, sorry about that little tirade. Back to the notes.
Oh.
So you have, like I said, just in North and South America combined, you have 2,000 languages that are from, let's say, 60-plus families. That totals 1/3 of the world's linguistic diversity. By the way, you have another third of the world's linguistic diversity. Actually, I think a little bit more even, believe it or not. It's almost half, or 40-something% in Papua New Guinea. Because otherwise, throughout the world, there's only 20 major languages. There's, I think, in the linguistic professor, John McWhorter, lectures I was listening to from him, he says something like 95 or 97% of the world's population speaks one of these 20 major languages. Yeah. And if, just for my own amusement, I'm going to see if I can remember them off the top of my head here. You have, let's see, English, French, Spanish, German, Portuguese, Mandarin Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, Tamil, Arabic, what's the Ethiopian language? Amharic, Russian. Crap. Alright, well, I got 15.
So what's with these languages?
They're one of these top 20 that, like something like 95% of the world speaks.
Huh.
Yeah, they might not speak it as their mother tongue, but there is the vast majority, like over 95% of the world's population, that also speak at least one of these 20 languages. Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't think Romanian is one of them.
Yeah, probably not. Because we've always stood in our boundaries, we never wanted to conquer or, it was more like a defensive place.
Yeah. Oh, Vietnamese, that's another one. Taiwanese. I'm bad about the Orient, I apologize. And of course, you're not even supposed to call it the Orient anymore, the Near East. Excuse me, no, the Far East. Well, that's offensive too, that's also Eurocentric. Well, so is my language. But, alright, what the hell are you supposed to call it? East Asia? Sounds redundant. But anyway, getting back on it.
East Asia works.
Yeah. Well, do you know what Asia meant to the Romans? Turkey.
Really?
Yeah, that was their province. They called that their province of Asia. It was
the Turkey.
And it wasn't even all of Turkey either. It was like the eastern part of it, basically like the Asian or Turkish side of Istanbul over that strait that I can't remember the name of right now, next to that thoroughly unpronounceable sea of Marmara or Marmara, or whatever. Marmora, the thing between the Adriatic and the Black Sea.
Yeah. Marsa something. Mare Marsa. I don't know.
That's close to you. You should know what that's called.
Yeah, Mare Marsa. But Mare just means, sea.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
All right, so back to the natives here. Geography, like I said, you could have people in a geographic area. You've got from the Mississippi River to the East Coast and up through the Great Lakes. That's pretty much all woods, deciduous trees. In the south, it's a warmer climate. In the north, it's a colder climate. But you still pretty much have the same plants. You just have a little bit more of them to the
wait
south.
A second. I think we're wrong, man. It's Marmara.
Yeah, I don't remember. That's why
it's just above the Black Sea.
No. I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about the one near Istanbul, where it's between the Black Sea and the Adriatic.
Fuck it.
Yeah, it's just south of the Hellespont. Helen's Pond.
Yeah, well, Turkey. It says Turkey, then so it's near Turkey.
You do realize Turkey occupies 2 continents, right?
Yeah, sort of.
Just checking. No, not sort of. It does.
I mean,
at least by the way we define.
It's smaller than Russia, I think.
That's not. I didn't say girth. I'm talking like, you know, you got one side of it where it's in Turkey, like mainland Turkey, quote unquote, and then on the other side of it,
half in Europe, half in Asia.
It's 9/10 in Asia, 1/10 in Europe. It's just this. It's basically just the city of Istanbul and the outlying countryside that borders up against some Slavic post-Soviet state that I can't remember the name of. Maybe it's Moldova or some shit. I don't know.
Bulgaria.
Yeah, sure. Maybe that one. I don't know. Some Baltics. I don't know. I confess.
Moldova is more like
it's not really
the Russians,
the
man.
I'm not part of the map. I really look at a lot.
Yeah, I'm looking at the map right now.
You know, pretty much anything north of Thrace is kind of out of my sphere of influence. And yes, I still call it Thrace. Anyway.
Yeah.
So
anyway, it's not relevant.
Yeah. So you got one thing here, you know, like you have the Cheyenne and the Comanche. They both lived in the plains, and they were nomadic, you know, that stereotypical teepee building, nomadic horse riding people. Now, the horse came from Europeans bringing it. Actually, the Mustang, the wild horse of the United States, is actually related to a breed of horse that was originally from Morocco in northwestern Africa. And the Spanish had influence with that region, and they liked that horse, and they brought it over with them. And it liked the area. So it went feral, and the natives that the ancestors of the Comanche and the Cheyenne and the Sioux and the Blackfeet, all of those nomadic tribes, they weren't always nomadic. If you don't have a horse, you can't live out there. You will die. There's just too much distance between water. So you need a horse in order to cover that land. The people before just lived along the rivers, and they were just like the eastern woodland natives, where they were settled agriculturalists. It was just very few of them, and only along the rivers. They didn't venture out into the plains. Horse came, then they were able to ride it, then they were able to make teepees, they were able to be nomadic, they were able to survive out there. Now you got, as an example, these two groups, the Cheyenne and the Comanche. The Cheyenne they were the underdog. They were lower in number. Maybe they were newcomers to the scene. I don't know their backstory. Nobody does. But what we do know is that they had a belief that when you had a child, that the child would receive the energy of the parents. So if you have one kid, your kid will be stronger than if you have two kids, because two kids are only going to get half the love and attention that otherwise a single child would get. So basically, they would have sex only once every 8 to 16 years. And that was to ensure they would only have one kid at a time. They would still have more than one child, only you'd have to wait for the first kid to grow up. Under the idea that otherwise they would be weak, and beyond that, they didn't have that much food to go around. The resources were limited. It was just sort of like a survival.
So this kind of philosophy worked for the situation.
Mm-hmm.
They lived within their means.
The Cheyennes also had they lived in bands. They had 10 of these bands in total, and they would each elect 4 men to some sort of central council. And essentially, they were kind of like a centralized group, a confederacy of tribes. The Comanche were different, where every Comanche band, if they wanted to do something, they just did it with complete autonomy, and the only thing they shared with the other Comanche bands was language and religion, basically. Otherwise, they're politically, and like their armies and stuff would have fought differently. Of course, they didn't have mounted armies the way we would think of them, but they still had war. And the Comanche are much more individualistic, and in physical stature, apparently the two groups were different. The Comanche males were, on average, about 5'4", 5'3", and barrel-chested. The women were kind of stocky, too, and a little bit shorter, whereas the Cheyenne were coming out on average about 6'1", 6'2". You know, they would have been like basketball players almost, and rather lean.
Or like myself.
Yeah, I mean, the Comanche and the Cheyenne looked at each other as differently as a European would look at them, as a Frenchman would look at them from somebody from Iran or, you know, Africa or something like that. So...
Something totally different.
Yeah, and the Europeans come out there and they just see Indians. And what's kind of funny is that at the time with the Victorians, if they understood what the Cheyenne were all about, they probably would have got along royally.
Same kind of.
They're like, oh, you don't have sex? You think that makes a stronger child? Oh, very interesting theory. I think that's actually a pretty good idea, you know, because this is the age when they used to put, you know, socks and stockings on table legs, lest that be erotic, you know.
What? Erotic table legs?
You haven't heard of that?
I've lived a sheltered life, apparently.
Maybe it's in a... Well, no, it's just a historical thing, but... yeah, I mean... Yeah, they were so sexually repressed, and legs were considered the thing at the time. Of course, I stand by the old quote from Jerry Seinfeld, where, when talking about women's legs, he says, "Legs? I've got legs." Anyway.
Yes.
No, one of the things that really irritates me about that whole thing is the amount of patents that were taken out on erection suppression devices for young boys. Have you heard of those?
Suppression devices. What?
No, I think I might have heard something like that on a horror story. Yeah.
If you'd like to be deeply disturbed, Google it. But yeah, I mean there are various contraptions that make it physically impossible to have an erection. The idea was that a man could only have an erection and come but so many times in a human lifetime, so you didn't want to waste it. So they'd have these 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old boys, and they're trying to keep them from wanking, basically.
It just seems so wrong.
It's funny. It's funny, but imagine growing up in 1893 and having that happen to you. How the fuck are you going to act
Torture.
20 years down the line? You're going to probably be a little fucked up.
Like everybody else was. As you pass on to your children.
This nth degree.
We're just gonna kill Indians so we can, you know, we can heal our mental sickness.
Take it out on them. This
Yeah.
sounds to me like this is how BDSM came around. You know?
I don't
Maybe
think
this
you're
was the
far.
plan.
I don't think you're far off the mark. Yeah, there's definitely a relationship between forbidding something that is completely natural. Like, I almost want to write a science fiction story. Imagine if pooping was against the Bible, but sex was cool. Like, you know, you could jerk off and fuck and all that all the time, whatever, that's okay, but you're not allowed to ever take a shit. Everybody would have to like hide to be able to do it. And,
But they already hide to do it.
Yeah.
yeah, but not like this. Like if it was like illegal under sentence of death, you know, that kind of thing. Like, you know, you're not allowed to poo.
Hey, he's over in those bushes having a...
You know, you'd
excrement.
probably get, yeah, exactly. You'd probably get people fetishizing something that otherwise is just a perfectly natural bodily process. For
Well,
God's sake.
there
You
are
know?
some people who already fetishize it. They live
I
in
know.
Germany. They live in Germany, that's all I'll say.
To be fair, I'd have to say that that's open to all humans. You know, I don't think it's fair to say that one group is more fucked up than another in that term, because that's kind of like saying, like, Japanese people don't have serial killers. Of course they do. Everybody has killers and murderers, just at different degrees. You know, I mean, basically what I'm saying is every culture has their fucked up crazy people, and some of those fucked up crazy people might like to eat shit.
Yes, and others like to go on radio, such as Vostok.
And this is definitely one of those episodes I'm not going to want my grandfather to listen to. Because last week I was helping my grandfather convalesce from a back surgery, and that man, I believe, has gone his entire life without ever saying one profane word ever. I know that sounds hard to believe, but my mother is in her mid-50s, and she's known him for a good while, and the most upset she's ever seen him was when she had a 6-pack of beer with a friend of hers at his house, and she was staying with him between marriages or some shit. And anyway, he said, "I would like for you and your friend to please leave." That was the maddest she's ever seen him in her life.
I should introduce her to my father.
They don't make them like that anymore, man.
They don't make them like that at all over here.
Yeah.
I kind of don't swear at all in the Romanian language, but in English it kind of feels natural, you know, it flows.
Well, you're getting your American English from people like me who don't give a fuck, and I'm not exactly Ivy League educated and middle class, so yeah, you're gonna hear a lot more of this.
In Dublin City, every second word most people say is obscenity.
Well, one of my favorite
this
comics,
and that.
my favorite comics, Lewis Black says that fuck isn't a word in this generation anymore; it's a comma.
Yeah. Something that ties things together.
When other people would say, be like, oh, fuck, yeah, the fucking, yeah, you know.
That is true. That is true. I don't know how it feels for an Englishman or for an American man or for a Scottish man or for an Irish man.
Well,
but,
we would just be called Americans. We don't do the man crap. That's a British thing. You'd have a Scotsman or an Englishman or an Irishman or a Welshman, but an American, you just call an American.
Yes, that's true, actually. He is an American.
Same with Canadian. You don't say Canadian, man.
Or Mexicans.
Yeah. Although I've become against that. That didn't make sense. I've come to not like hearing that just because ignorance seems to... You know, this is a quote from a good friend of mine, Joseph DiGirolamo. He said, you know what your problem is you can't tolerate ignorance. And he's right.
It's a pretty profound statement.
He got it from his dad. But anyway, his dad said it to him about an unrelated topic, and he later on... Anyway, but he's right. And, you know, it's like, all right, I think the numbers are something like 70% of illegal immigrants are from Mexico, and the other 10 or 15% are from Cuba, and then everything else, the little bit that's left over, are from all other Central and South American countries. There's not nearly as many El Salvadorians as there are Mexicans, for example. But there's still El Salvadorians in the United States. Now, we've been talking about amnesty in the American politics lately, and I've always been in favor of complete amnesty for anybody in the Western Hemisphere because we've fucked the Western Hemisphere for the past 150 years with the Monroe Doctrine. So I think we need to pick up the pieces. But that's just me. And the reason it'll never happen is because of the labor force. Illegal labor is cheaper than legal labor. Always has been, always will be. Bam, there you go. That's why it's not going to change. The price of apples would skyrocket. All food would go up. All major repair services would increase in cost because you'd have to have legal labor that's paid above the minimum wage. And they're not going to do that. So they're not going to create amnesty, and they're not going to create any kind of program for people that have been in the country for 20 years and they're here illegally and working and not paying taxes.
That makes sense. It happens in Europe a lot as well.
Yes. It's just a capitalist thing, I think.
It is. Yeah, it is. It is. It really is like, imagine if this was let's make an analogy. We're Comanches sitting out in the plains or something like that, and we've each got, one horse and a teepee and a wife, and then we see this other group across the river, and they've got things that fly in the air and water that's hot and cold and all that stuff. Wouldn't you want some of that too?
Cool.
I wouldn't know what to make out of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a bad analogy, but essentially what I'm saying is, you've got somebody with a whole shitload of food sitting next to somebody hungry. They're going to come over and try to get some of the food. And how are you going to stop it?
You're going to go and do Cassius Marcellus Clay on him.
Well,
hey, you want to check out my Bowie knife, boy? Bang! Now we're going to eat you.
hey, you know something that was completely inane that I heard? When I take a shower, I like to listen to the radio news. Because I abstained from TV. I gave up watching TV about, I think that was in 2008. But it's just too banal, and I can't stand the fucking commercials. I do watch a few programs on the internet and things like that if I could watch it,
But they don't have commercials on.
I prefer to watch on the internet too.
Or at least they have fewer commercials, and at least I could watch it whenever the hell I want instead of having to tune in at a certain time.
Do you use Netflix?
Yeah, I do. Netflix sucks, and the only reason I still have it is because I have a penchant for watching shitty movies.
Yes, I like to watch crappy movies too.
Like Oversexed Rock Suckers from Mars.
Yes.
Yeah, that was bad. I have a good one I recently saw on Netflix. It's called Good for Nothing. The plot sounds really bad. It's about this guy who's trying to rape a woman, but it's funny because he can't get an erection, so he's trying to go to different doctors to, get it fixed. And they're like, I don't know, go talk to those Chinese guys. They know some heathen medicine, blah, blah, blah. It's really funny.
What's it called?
Good for Nothing.
Sounds like a highly unusual, unorthodox type of film.
Yeah. I think Sam Raimi had a minor hand in it, or at least gave it a good review.
That explains it. Sam Raimi, he likes to make strange movies that I like.
Yeah.
Except for Spider-Man 1 and 2. They were pretty cool.
Yep.
What other movies he made except Spider-Man and the Evil Dead and the Pirates of the Caribbean?
Sam Raimi didn't make Pirates of the Caribbean. He's produced a lot of movies.
Peter Jackson, sorry.
No, Pirates of the Caribbean was directed by Gore Verbinski. Disney made Pirates of the Caribbean.
So what did Peter Jackson do?
Lord of the Rings, when he's doing The Hobbit. That was his big one.
Okay.
Okay.
Alright. Well, I got something else for you here about the natives. In the Valley of Mexico, between the Valley of Mexico and Peru, you have the most densely populated area in the New World. That's true for both before and after 1500. These peoples had passed through what we call the Neolithic Revolution, and that's basically just it means the New Stone Age, but it's when agriculture and domesticated crops and settled living came about roughly 10,000 years ago, but it depends on where. And one of the funny things from McClellan was he was saying, and by the way, Neolithic means New Stone Age. Paleolithic means Old Stone Age. Archaeologists could just call it the Old and New Stone Ages, but then they wouldn't sound like they know very much then they wouldn't sound like they know any more about it than you do. And of course I butchered that statement.
Or it is a scam.
Big words are cool.
Yeah. But anyway, a person asked, because I recorded these lectures from a digital audio recorder on my desk when I was sitting in the class. Somebody asked, well, when was the Neolithic Revolution? And he says, well, it depends. It's something people passed through at various times depending on where they were in the world. In Peru, it was about 8,500 BC. In England, it was about 3,000 BC. There's been agriculture for 5,500 years longer, or excuse me, yeah, I was right the first time, 5,500 years longer in Peru than there has been in England. Do you know how many potatoes there are? There's like 500 fucking different kinds of potatoes that have been domesticated in Peru.
Sir Walter Raleigh brought the potato to Britain, and he brought it from Peru.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
He brought it to the United States and introduced it to the natives here too. Actually, he was the same guy who brought domesticated tobacco, wasn't he?
That's right, yes. And there was actually King James, I think, was on the throne at the time, and he was actually lobbying against smoking. He warned people about it. He said it was no good for them.
Tobacco was illegal until they figured out they could make a shitload of money off of it. That's when they changed the laws. Yeah, McClellan has the thing where he was quoting, it might have been King James, I don't remember, but he was saying, tobacco is bad for the brain, bad for the throat, deleterious to the lungs, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, they knew, but Riley brought a particularly mellow blend of, or domestication of tobacco from the Caribbean and grew it in Virginia. And that's when they realized, because they didn't find any gold, and they were already depleting the timber, and you had virgin, old hardwood undepleted soil, so you could grow tobacco, which, by the way, practically poisons soil. You know what you can grow the year after you grow tobacco? Fucking nothing. That's what you can grow.
So it's a menace. It's a natural menace.
What they would do, the reason the state of Virginia and North Carolina are shaped the way they are is because they would start at the coast, they would cut down old growth forest, grow tobacco. They wouldn't even get rid of the trees. They'd just grow in between the trees. And then after that season, they'd move west, cut down more, and repeat, and repeat, and repeat. By the time they got to the Appalachian Mountains, about 100-something years had passed, the soil had been fallow and able to come back, and then you had cotton and other things being grown.
A bunch of assholes.
So raping the land.
Yeah.
Yet you still smoke right now, Miles.
Yeah, I do, but I guess you could make the argument that thanks to Philip Morris, most of what I'm smoking probably isn't tobacco. It's
chemistry.
I don't know, ground up Chinese newspapers soaked in antifreeze, something like that.
Ah, yes. That sounds about right.
I gotta say, though, it is smooth.
Ah, cool. I am smoking some of Rick Simpson's best.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like fucking stoner.
Well, no, I got a little bit of that too. It's just, I'm kind of like a holy trinity vice kind of person, pot, beer, and smoke.
You know what I found really, really lame and really funny? The commercials in United States in the 50s when they all smoke cigars in every commercial or in every movie, and they do those fake smiles and buy this, buy that, with pointless commercials made by brain-dead people.
Saturday Night Live? They had a thing on Saturday Night Live years ago talking about people that were getting sick at a hospital, and this guy was trying to figure out what the problem was. And you know what the problem, he concluded? It was that the cigarette holders weren't disinfected. Because all the patients were given cigarettes, of course, to smoke after their surgery, and, they were getting sick, and he was like, oh, the cigarette holders aren't clean.
Give that man an apple after giving him a kick in the skull to get his brain working properly. Good Lord.
Yeah. I mean, you could smoke in a hospital up, I think, through the 1970s. Yeah,
really.
I mean, when I was a kid in the 90s, I remember the McDonald's near me when I was a kid up until about 1997, 98. They still had a smoking section in there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. You remember smoking and non-smoking sections? Like, it made much of a difference. It was like.
Yeah, it was silly. It was just sort of like, oh, okay, so I can still smell it, but it's all the way over here now.
Yes. You can't blow it in my face from all the way over there, yet I can still smell your...
And inhale it.
Yeah, I'm breathing it in.
In Montgomery County, Maryland, this was years ago, early 2000s. Montgomery County, Maryland is the county just north and west of Washington, D.C. It has a population of about 1 million people, and it's one of the wealthier counties in the country. Lots of yuppies. I don't know if y'all know that term.
Yes.
But, basically, they made a law that said that if somebody was on their property smoking a cigarette and you are a neighbor and you could smell the cigarette, that you could call the police and that person would get a ticket.
Can you shoot him, though?
The law lasted for about 3 months. People went fucking bonkers. People that don't even approve of smoking were calling it an invasion of privacy and all of that. But there's laws around the United States from time to time. They crop up where they're saying, you know, yeah.
Yeah,
City
we had
laws
something.
no longer serve purpose. I think I remember reading an article about that years ago. Apparently, it's illegal in some parts of the states for a fireman to rescue a woman if she's in her nightgown.
Well, I think
Well, I could be wrong.
oral
because-
sex. Well, oral sex is still illegal in the Commonwealth of Virginia and a few other southern states.
I think it's illegal to impersonate some animals in Hawaii.
And in West Virginia, if the animal weighs more than 40 pounds, it's legal to have sex with it.
That's pretty fucked up.
Oh, man. You know the comedian Jimmy Carr?
Yes.
All right.
Well, I don't know him. I don't know of him.
He had this one thing where he was talking about the age of consent in Mexico. The age of consent in Mexico is 12. He's like, well, I guess that's one way of dealing with your pedophilia problem. You can marry a girl at 12 years of age in Mexico.
Oh, honey, for your honeymoon, I bought you this special Barbie doll, and it is anatomically correct. Now, this is
Like,
where
wow,
I'm going to touch you.
You're menstruating. You're now technically a woman by ancient standards.
You are a child. You will carry my child, and as a child, you will raise my child. Yeah, that's pretty fucked up, man.
And make other childs.
That's crazy stuff.
Well, like I said, I mean, Cassius Clay, you know,
Yes,
at the age of 86, married a 15-year-old girl. I mean, her parents consented and everything. It was all
She
cool.
didn't.
No, she
Apparently-
did. She did consent. The town heard the news and the town went crazy. The girl consented.
Did you? I actually just looked him up on Wikipedia.
Mhm.
No, just something that I read. It's like he died of general exhaustion. It didn't mention whatsoever. Now, I'm not undermining what you said, but it hasn't been included. But the whole article seems to
Not
have.
surprised.
Yeah, it's painting him as a politician. It's like it doesn't mention any of his epic violence.
Yeah.
It's like
McClellan was pulling these really awesome stories out of a large library of research that he had done on the subject. Like I said, the book, I'll try to give you the citation real quick because we don't have that much time left. But, it's The Lion of Whitehall by William H. Townsend.
that would be well worth a read.
Yeah.
But there was something that I just wanted to run by you quickly about the wiki article.
Mhm.
It stated that when he got married, his bride wasn't willing and he had to lock her in a room. And she tried to commit suicide, apparently, by throwing
Wow.
herself out a window.
I never heard that part of the story. That's terrible.
That is pretty bad. Let me see if I can find it very quickly and link it to you.
Well, I've seen the wiki article, but you know, I take Wikipedia with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I take it with a grain of salt, too. So that's why I wanted to run it by you, because you obviously know a lot more about it than I do.
Well,
Or was
actually, did you get the link in the chat earlier that I sent for the YouTube YouTube version of this lecture that I was citing?
Yes, I'm going to watch the whole, there's 5
Yeah.
videos. I'm going to watch them.
I think there's 4 of them. They're each, I think, 8 minutes long. It's not a terribly long lecture, but that's what I'm basing all of this on. I have pretty good faith that McClellan is accurate.
Yes.
So, And I really want to get that book. I tried to order it, but it was more than $40, so I didn't do it.
You might just have to swallow your pride and pay the $40.
Yeah, I might have to. Yeah.
On a rare occasion, sometimes I'd pay that for a book.
Yeah.
Right. Say your final words.
Well, this is the last show, so why does it have to exactly end right now if we don't want it to?
Okay.
I mean, it's the last show.
No, I'm just asking. I'm just asking a question. Like, can we shoot the shit for another 10 minutes?
We can.
Cool. I like this because it's not just me this time. Because there's like human interaction and
Well,
Yeah, there were other humans,
me
but they
not
left.
being a drunken hermit.
technically, Bosto isn't a human.
Yes.
Neither am I.
There were
Why,
other
'cause-
humans,
why,
but
'cause
they...
why, 'cause he's like a man?
No, because he's a vampire.
Oh, he's a vampire.
No, vampire.
Yes, Chimzoid is right.
He is
That's how you
a-
pronounce it.
He is a Romanian vampire.
Yeah.
Hey, what happened to Dawn? Are you still around, Dawn? We were going to talk about, I was going to talk about Boudica or Boudicca.
Dawn is not here, I know. Wait, which Dawn?
Dawn's gone. It's Darkcity. No, she is not.
Kali or Prajna or who?
No, Dawn.
Dawn.
The, the Scottish lady.
Scottish.
Oh, no, I think you were talking. All right.
No, Dawn's there.
Dawn
Yeah,
is
there you
probably
are.
well in bed by now, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say she's
It
in
was
bed.
me you were talking to earlier.
Yeah,
Anyway.
you. What, I'm sorry, what is your name?
Callie.
Yes,
Holly?
Callie.
Yeah.
Callie.
Kali. Oh, like Kalima?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm,
She's
yeah,
chill.
alright. Well, that's,
We all like Callie. I think it's short for Caroline.
I prefer Dirk.
No, it's Callie. It was the name was given to me by Prajna's teacher, spiritual teacher, Indian guy.
Okay.
So it is, yes, it's just like Kalima.
Yeah, it is. Kali, the bringer of ends, the destroyer. It's actually, he gave me the name Kali Prajita, and Prajita is invincible or driven or unstoppable.
Yes,
so
yes.
it's a pretty
Well,
good name.
So you
I-
cut off the heads of your enemies and drink their blood?
It's been known, yeah.
Well, no. The first thing she needs to do is make the skirt of severed arms and have the necklace of severed heads. But I prefer Durga. Durga has. Don't think of me as being terribly knowledgeable, and I'm going to mispronounce all of these words. But I happen to have an effigy from India of Marathi origin that has the 9 permutations of Durga. Are you there?
I'm entirely lost, baby.
No,
Who's
Durga-
there?
The
I'll-
sound.
Similar god to Kali or another similar avatar.
Okay. There's so many of them. There's flipping millions of them.
Oh, there's Mahi.
What was Durga an incarnation of?
I think she's one of the forms of Parvati, isn't she?
One of the forms of Kali.
Parvati.
Oh. It looks like
We've lost the connection
We've
to the
lost the
server
connection.
in tab 4, it says. What's that?
that means that
The show,
possibly picked it up.
Yeah, it's gone there, babe. Yeah, Paul might be doing something. He might be telling us to end.
Yeah, I think that.
We're not
I think
streaming
it might have
anyway.
ended anyway.
Alright, well, that's fine.
Oh, hang on, it's back.
Wait.
It's back.
So we're back on
It's
now?
back.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, during the break, Alien Miles, I requested that one of these days you do a show on the Romans in Britain, and basically what on earth happened. What was the political landscape of Britain?
Can you please mute your radio?
I was going to say, there's some really bad distortion coming on.
Oh, yeah.
Mute the radio. That will fix it.
Yes. Evil possessed radio.
And eat virgin Virgin people.
Virgin
I
Nets.
was monitoring the stream, but I didn't know that it was coming across through.
It was a bit loud.
Alright, there you are. Well, off the top of my head, all I know is Suetonius, who wrote the 12 Caesars, was up there during the reign of Nero, and I believe in Britain it's pronounced Boudicca, of the Illyrian tribe that fought the Roman army. This would have been in the beginning of the 100s AD, I think. That's all I know. And she eventually...
Boudica.
Yeah. Well, I would pronounce it Boudica, but I've heard it by other British people pronounced Boudicca or Boudicca.
I've heard it pronounced Boudica.
So, yeah, interchangeable.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I know so little. I mean, shamefully little about that time, but it's fascinating. I know that Boudicca was said to... her daughters were raped by Romans, invading Romans, and so she went along and fought them off and said, "Get the fuck out of my country," you know.
Yeah, they were. She and her daughters were imprisoned and sent to Rome, and Boudica was flogged while she watched her two daughters being gang raped like several times.
Yeah.
And then the Romans let her go, which doesn't make any sense. Because now she's pissed, and she raised an army, with the whole backstory, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, that's horrible, let's kill Romans." And she raised an army, and Suetonius was the general in that province at the time, and he eventually cornered her in a valley and hacked them all to bits.
Yeah. Another thing I heard about a year or so ago, a friend of ours called Michael of Bernicia kind of came up with a theory. Apparently, around the time that the Romans actually invaded and conquered Britain, right before that time, there is evidence of vitrified rock in man-made structures. Which kind of indicates some sort of a meteor strike or something like that.
That's absolutely right, but it occurred a lot earlier than the period when the Romans came over.
Ah, right, okay. All right. Yeah. So there's an awful lot of digging to do, isn't there?
Robert Schoch's new book is all about that.
Okay.
They never got as far as Hibernia.
Is that Ireland?
Yes.
Yeah, they never fucked with Ireland. I think they did have a little contact in the Isle of Man, but that was about as far west as they ever went.
See Romans.
And I mean, one of the real fascinating things about the Roman Empire is what they brought to the various countries that they conquered. And then what they left behind, if indeed they could be described to have left, given what they did leave behind, the political systems.
You have the city of London, the city of Belarus, the city of Paris. These were all Roman towns.
Yeah, there's lots and lots of Roman towns still in Britain. Oh, we've just lost Steve. Oops.
I haven't lost anything. What are you talking about?
I don't know anymore. No, we've lost VNC, but as long as we're still streaming, it's cool.
Yeah.
Streaming power.
I'm trying to get a friend of mine together to make another show at some point that would be like a comedy, but he's too unreliable.
What have you got in mind?
Get Shimzo. Shimzo is a very comedic person.
No, that's a friend of mine who's wanted to be on the radio for a while, but I don't know. We were talking about trying to do something on Sundays, but I don't know. I'll have to give him a call.
Yeah.
Try to twist his arm.
You could always.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing we haven't got on the Darkcity really is comedy.
Yes, we got nonsense.
You need a few sketch shows.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Highlight the nonsense.
We got Summoning the Nonsense with Zachary Winchester.
We keep missing it, Vosto. It feels awful, but we're always caught up in these big, long Skype things after doing the production on a Sunday, and yeah,
Yes.
missing it. I feel very bad.
Very lame people.
So you should feel bad. It is a bad thing to miss Zachary's Winchester time.
Oh, I love Zach as well. And you.
And me?
I always listen to the show.
I am Vosto.
Well, I like talking about plants too, but I don't have that much to say.
They grow on you, yes?
Yeah.
And you've got some plant knowledge, haven't you, babe?
Plants? What plants do I know a little bit about foraging plants and medical herbs and what you can find in hedgerows and so on, a little bit.
Much of which was left behind by the Romans, actually, in this country.
Interesting.
Nettles.
Yes, I have fallen through many nettles.
Mushroom.
I've heard of hedgerows in France with the Americans in World War II, but that's the only knowledge I have of them. It's kind of weird to me that you could have a border between two fields that's been the same line for 800 years.
Sorry, I'm a bit distracted reading the text in Skype.
That's all right.
I was once dragged through a bed of nettles by an over-enthusiastic pit bull. I was stung so many times on the back that I actually felt good.
Hey, what's that? Isn't there some plant that's like the antidote for those things?
Yes, a dock leaf.
Duck leaf, yeah. I remember my brother-in-law was talking about that once with his dad. I heard that.
But do you know nettle stings? If you've got arthritis and you roll around in nettles, you're going to do your arthritis an awful lot of good and take down the inflammation and stuff.
Yes. We'll take down the inflammation of arthritis by bringing in the inflammation of nettle venom.
We have got a friend, actually, who had arthritis in his hands, and he was clearing some land over the course of one summer, working really hard, hacking through nettles and brambles and all that. And so he was getting stung constantly by the nettles, and by the time the winter came, he had no problem with arthritis.
I eat nettles.
Do you?
Yes.
I've heard they're quite nice in a stew. I've never had them myself.
If you put a lot of garlic inside, which is against the rules.
So you have nettles all around Europe, I guess. They're in Romania as well.
Romania.
They're in next to my house everywhere. I don't know.
Yes, they're pretty common.
I've never even seen the damn things.
A lot, yeah. They kind of have an aggressive aspect.
They're in New Zealand as well, but they're much smaller. You don't see they're great big ones, and they never grow as thickly. Really,
but they're an indication that you've got good, healthy, rich soil, aren't they? Apparently.
They are a damn nuisance when you fall through them.
Or when you get dragged through by a pit bull.
Silly dog. He thought it was amusing.
Well, I need to go to the bathroom, so I guess we're done with the show. If you don't mind.
All right, Miles, it's been absolutely wonderful again. I do love your shows. I've got such massive history ignorance, so I love tuning in.
Thank you.
Best show in the universe. Produced by Foster.
Yeah. We need to get this on. We need to get this somehow on iHeartRadio or something.
No, the Darkcity is epic enough.
And I shall now play Django Reinhardt.
Fuck yeah! End it with that.
Yeah.
Next time we'll get some other things.
Yes, Foster Power.
Yeah, we'll sort you out of the playlist.
Goodbye. Thank you for listening and stuff.
Alete.